we have operated in a social structure where multiple generations have lived together. For the longest time, our workplaces have had multiple generations work together. So what is it that has really changed today? That is really prompting and nudging us to have conversations like this.
If I was to assign a task, my team itself at most of the places has been a combination of all the generations put together. And I personally feel that what Gen X and baby boomers can add is more, on the leadership side, on the experience side, on the critical thinking side. Whereas the millennials and the Gen Zs, they have different ways of doing things.
While we might try to, broadly categorize, it becomes harder when we look at these many intersectionalities. So that's one reflection.
The recipe for a true successful organizational strategy is to have an inclusive one when you're designing your workplace culture or you're thinking of your retention or skill enhancement programs.
The 3 R's, as I call them, right? Respect, recognition, and runway. These 3 things are common across all generations, and it's very important for organizations to focus on building that up as part of their DNA.
You would be surprised to know that EY is very, very big on tech consulting, which was not our forte ever. And where did that thought come from? It came from the generations which came with knowledge of things which are happening on the ground today.
Welcome to Tales and Lattes, where every cup tells a story. Vaishnavi and myself from the team Power Pivot are mighty excited to have you all here with us in this room today. I'm Diksha, the founder of Power Pivot and Tales and Lattes, and I cannot wait for us to dive into the subject at hand. Today, we are with subject matter experts, industry veterans, talking about and unboxing a theme that is really shaping the future of work globally. And that theme is around managing an intergenerational workforce. When we think of India, a supremely diverse country just by way of its being, and when you look at workplaces within India, they're nothing but a microcosm itself of what India represents, and where different generations, cultures, perspectives kind of come to a common ground. And that there are umpteen researches and reports, but what is very heartening to see is that India's workforce is largely under 35. But at the same time, we also have what we call seasoned baby boomers and Gen Xers whose wisdom and experience are still very much a part of our workforce. Now, when we look at this spectrum, I know diversity is a word that is not being spoken about too much, but when we look at the diversity in this spectrum, it is both a challenge and an opportunity. So the questions that we're trying to unearth and talk about today are going to be around how do we then go about navigating this intergenerational diversity? How do we have mechanisms and platforms and tools by which we can turn these generational gaps into bridges? While I was going through and doing some research on the subject, there are 2 themes that stood out for me, which I'd like to call out here. And I'm sure we will unravel these as we move along, aside of, apart from this, a lot of other things as well. But, as I was going through the details, I understood that while the West is truly grappling with an aging population, and thus the workplace implications that tend to come with it, but in India, we have a very youthful demographic dividend in that sense. Why then now have conversations like these become so important? Forever, we have operated in a social structure where multiple generations have lived together. For the longest time, our workplaces have had multiple generations work together. So what is it that has really changed today? That is really prompting and nudging us to have conversations like these. So how is it changed? How are we collaborating? How we are learning? How is leadership being perceived across different generations? And what really is the change that is coming around? And the second core thought that really came to me was that, with all of these conversations around diversity, the one thing that really stands on the fence for me personally is that the minute we begin to slot people into generational categories, and the minute we begin to generalize and say Gen X stands for this and Gen I stands for this, aren't we already undermining the whole purpose of diversity? While, post pandemic, these generational frictions have kind of gotten more pronounced, more amplified because of things like great resignation, hybrid work models, more tech enabled workspaces. But they have also, in a lot of ways, impacted the trust equation between generations. So while there are challenges, while there are questions, and I always say this and I will repeat it in this conversation as well, I strongly believe we may not have all the answers right here, right now in this room. But the fact that we're asking the right questions is testimony to our investment in the cause. Right? So on that note, I would want for us to just go deeper and navigate this generational mosaic that we already have and turn this potential friction into fuel for future growth. We will jump into the heart of the conversation, but before that, in a fun, interactive way, if I could possibly spotlight each one of you to go in and introduce yourselves, take about a minute, but how about you introduce yourselves with a little bit of a twist? So you share your name, you share what you do, very important for us to know, but you also share with us one stereotype about your generation that you completely defy. So take a moment if you'd like, and we'd be happy to put you on the hot seat and get us going with the introductions.
Okay, so Bani Khurana, Bani as I'm called because there can't be a shorter name to Bani, so thankfully. I think there's one stereotype which definitely I would like to defy, which is the reluctance to be open to new ideas. No, so that's definitely not so true as well. So, yeah. And by profession, of course, DNI professional and an HR veteran and a talent management professional as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Bani. Thank you.
Hey folks, Aditya here. Proud millennial and a proud blind Bangalorian. One of the stereotypes about being a millennial is that millennials are self-entitled and are commitment phobic. So that's something which I believe is an absolute stereotype and absolutely wrong. So would love to unpack that as we kind of go through the discussion today. From a professional standpoint, been in HR for close to 2 decades and currently an independent consultant.
Thank you for that.
Maybe I
Aditya.
can go next.
Mahima? Yes, please.
Yeah. My name is Mahima, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. I have been in the industry for close to 2 decades now, working across several domains. One stereotype that I would like to defy is that millennials are lazy. So I'm a millennial, and I relate myself to the stereotype that usually baby boomers have, and that is they have very strong ethic and dedication towards work. So I relate to that.
Hi, this is Arun Narasimhan. I think one stereotype, and that comes more from the generation after us, is that they feel that we don't care too much about life outside of work, or we don't have a life outside of work because, and they think they are cool, right? And there's nothing wrong about it. Just to defy that, we actually had this football competition where we said, okay, above 30 versus below 30, and we thrashed them, and we just proved that we are great at sports, and so there's nothing which stops us from being what we are at work and still manage our life outside of work. So I think that's something that I love working with the new gen because they bring a lot of confidence and flamboyance which I didn't have when I started off. But it's sometimes important to also to prove that there are a lot of things that we can do which they think we don't care about.
Thank you so much. Well, we're off to a good start in a fun way, and thank you so much for flowing with that little bit of a icebreaker, so to say. Um, so obviously we've had these offline conversations with each of you, and as we look at your respective experiences, basis what we've gathered are areas that you could add value to. We'd like to keep bringing you in, but at any point, if anyone else in this virtual room wants to chime in, has a perspective to share, has a reflection that you want to really add on with, please feel free to just jump right into the conversation. Now, as we know, and we've discussed, every generation comes in with its own nuances. But if we just step back and we try to unravel this, we also understand that every generation has grown up in a very different context. And because of which, the influences that have really shaped them have been starkly different. While we may all be aware of these influences, but how do you really see these differences manifest at the workplace and become a source of conflict in that sense? So if I could invite maybe you, Aditya, to come in here and talk to us about your perspective on this one, and it will be great if you could also bring in a real life anecdote. Could be a funny one, a challenging one, just an experience of how this kind of played along for you at work.
Sure, Diksha. Happy to chime in. I think just before we get into some of these, questions, I think it's important to understand a little bit about what's actually changed in society in the last 30 years. And I believe that the changes, and since it's a very India-specific conversation, right? I think the last 30 years have been seismic in terms of the changes that we've seen. So that's really impacted every aspect of our life, right? From economic opportunities to access to information to choices that you would make in terms of work to choices you'd make in terms of relationships and family, right? All of these are very different when we look back at our parents' generation or even like 30 years back. So what's that done for us is in terms of two specific call outs, right? Access to information. So when we were growing up, I'm an early millennial, right? So when we were growing up, we didn't have access to internet. Internet came in the late 90s, right? So when you would want to make a career choice, you would actually have to kind of either speak to somebody or go and search for it in terms of a book, right? And I remember the first time I actually used the internet was, when I was making a choice in terms of the college I would be getting into, and that's when I had information access to it. But that's very different to the generation which has actually grown up in the last 10 years, right? They have information at their fingertips. So that completely transforms the way they access information, they consume information, and make decisions. That's the first piece of it, right? The second piece of it is in terms of, I would say, deference to authority. That's something which is fundamentally that's changed significantly since the time we've grown up, right? When we were in schools and colleges, any authority figure was considered to be, you had to give that person respect. You had to talk in a certain way. There were certain things that you would not be able to question. There were certain questions you could never kind of go and approach that person and ask that person, right? But I think now it's changed significantly to an extent where I would say in any town hall, you would have interns who joined the company like less than 2 months back, asking really tough questions to the CEO, right? And I think that's a huge change in terms of where we see the differences in terms of how people have grown up and how that's impacted the way we approach work, the way we approach relationships at work, the way we actually approach our careers, right? So now, coming to how it really impacts us, I would say one is access to information at work. Any organization which prevents access to information at work is probably not ready for the future, right? That's one. The second is as we kind of change the perception of authority and deference to authority, how do you approach that in a non judgmental fashion and provide the right platforms for individuals of various generations to speak up openly? That's going to be very important, right? And the third is career pathing, right? I think we cannot have conventional, traditional career paths anymore, and you need to be open to various career paths in terms of approaches, right? Now you asked me for an interesting anecdote, and while I'm an early millennial, I think I continue to be shocked sometimes in terms of some of the challenges and questions that some of the team members ask me. Right, a couple of years back, one of my team members said, "I'm going to take a mental wellness day off." While we've spoken about wellness, we've spoken about a lot of these pieces. I think it took me by shock that somebody would actually come and approach me so directly and say, "I just need a mental wellness day off," right? Which is amazing because I think all of us need to kind of build in that confidence to be able to say that, "Hey, we need to take a pause at different points of time."
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective, Aditya. And I think I'm in agreement with you on most of these things. I often say this that we live in a world of information overload across generations. I think one of our biggest struggles is how do we really derive some intelligence from the plethora of information that we live in? So, very, very legitimate point on that one, and some of the others that you brought to fore. All on the mental wellness as well. I think there's a journey that all of us have covered generationally, coming to terms with how we perceive it now. But having said that, Maima, what about you? What would your perspective and experience on this end be? How would you really talk about some of those touch points where intergenerational conflicts have shown up for you at workplace? Have you or someone else in your team approached these conflicts or these scenarios with misconceptions on what each generation holds within them? How have you seen the play of things?
Let's start with that anecdote, the one that you talked about. I'm going to bring an example to life from my personal space, and it was really funny for me back in the day. So I remember tried explaining to my aunt, who's from a traditionalist generation, about a relationship, a romantic relationship between two women who were both my friends. And she was utterly confused. So she asked me questions like who wears the pants in the relationship and who cooks. So I told her that it's not about wearing pants, it's more about love and commitment. And then both of them are great cooks. They take turns cooking, just that they don't have a lot of argument. But you know what? The communication didn't go anywhere. She was even more perplexed. So, this is one hilarious example that I can quote. I'm not saying that everybody from the traditionalist generation would not understand the challenges and the community. However, this was one of my examples, which was really challenging for me to put across. Now to your question about what are those touch points where differences crop up? I guess wherever there is a human connection, there is a possibility for a difference to crop up. Even if it is at a workplace, it could be a one-on-one meeting, or it could be a water cooler discussion, or decision-making, important meetings, conferences. Whenever there are people who meet from different generations, there could be a possible difference. And it is because of the conflicting priorities sometimes. All the generations may have different thought processes, different communication styles, different values, belief systems, behaviors. So, for example, if I talk about Gen Zs and millennials, there's ample study that confirms that work-life balance is a top priority for them. However, that may not even make sense for some of the generations from the older times, right? They would say, oh, what is work-life balance? One should be dedicated towards their work, and that's about it. Another example could be of the fact how tech adoption is so high for Gen Zs and millennials. According to a McKinsey study, about 62% millennials call themselves as experts in AI. And that goes for about 50% of Gen Zs. However, when it comes to baby boomers, it's only 22%. And I'm not saying that, that's McKinsey. In fact, it's the latest research, 2025 one. Another piece is about, how Gen Zs and millennials, Gen Zs more, they are more concerned about climate, sustainability, and they would want to maybe, there is one study, and maybe I can quote that too. About 40% Gen Zs and millennials are either likely to drop off from their workspace, or they've already done that over climate concerns. 9 in 10 Gen Zs and millennials say that purpose is core to their job satisfaction. So there are very, very different priorities, very different outlooks towards life. And hence, companies struggle a little bit. It's a tricky spot for them. However, the recipe for a true successful organizational strategy is to have an inclusive one when you're designing your workplace culture, or you're thinking of your retention or skill enhancement programs. This is what I would say.
Thank you so much, Mahima. And I think when you were talking about, some of those narratives, and even when Aditya was mentioning, the one or two touch points that really crossed my mind were, there was this huge stir, and in a way we saw like generational divides in responses when there were statements made by some industry veterans, and we'll steer clear of names, but we all know, who emphasized the need for working professionals to work beyond regular work hours, and that is what is going to fuel India's growth, organizations growth, and so on and so forth. Some hailed this as a call to hard work and progress, and others, from a few other generations, pushed back, citing work life balance, mental well being, and your efficiency are more important than just spending those hours. Do you think, and I'd open this out to everyone in the room, Bani, Arun, if you'd like to chime in as well, Aditya, Mahima, do you think debates like these and conversations like these go on to reflect a much deeper generational shift in how we have traditionally viewed work, output, progress, success, commitment? Some of these definitions that we think are foundational to us, that we've just inherited. Do you think with the changing, evolving generational mindset, that difference is also something that is getting soaked into our overall workplace environment?
I think, in my view is, so if you look at when it comes to hard work or the number of hours that you put in, right, and some of these startups which are not from our generation or from say generation that came before us, they're working maybe even more than what you hear about on social media, right? So it's not. I don't think the concept of hours and hard work is lost on everyone, on anyone, right? And everyone agrees to it. It's just that maybe the new gen is more flexible. They think working overnight is as good as say from 9 to 6, and which is what we believe in traditionally, because we have this inherent or inbuilt view that you get up early in the morning, you exercise, you send your kids to school, you come to work, you go back. That's our system. But that is not their system. But then number of hours, I don't think have come down, and rightfully so. I mean, everyone, and it's when you love something that you do, uh, you don't think about the number of hours. So I don't. I think the values in that sense have remained across generations. They've remained. It's just the flexibility that you get to work, which probably has changed over the years.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for bringing to fore that perspective. Bani, anything from you on this one?
No, I just like to go back, Diksha, to from where you started, and you said that are we making a mistake, by bucketizing generations itself. So I have a very different point of view here. I feel we have this tendency, this classical tendency is there to make start bucketizing people into generations, because end of the day, if we look at things very deeply, we all are human beings, we all have very similar intrinsic needs. When it comes to respect, we all want respect, we want a sense of belonging, we want sense of connections, we want to feel competitive when we come at work. I think the only place where the generational piece comes into interplay is, I definitely agree that we all grew up differently. There were influencing factors. Therefore, what happened as a result is that we developed different norms. Now, when we develop different norms, ways of doing things changed. So that's the opportunity we need to actually leverage on. As in, to give an example, if we were to assign a task, say if I was to assign a task, I mean, my team itself at most of the places has been a combination of all the generations put together. And I personally feel that what Gen X and baby boomers can add is more, on the leadership side, on the experience side, on the critical thinking side. Whereas the millennials and the Gen Zs, they have different ways of doing things. So, it's about more about the, I would say, the know how vis a vis the know whom and the know when. That's how I bucketize it in my head, in the sense that, the Gen Z will have always have a smarter way of doing things. because they've grown up in an environment where speed and agility and all these things matter. And of course the Gen X will definitely know better whom to talk to the organization, how to get things done, where is the why fitting in. And then the baby boomer will step in because he's had invaluable experience, so there'll be the when factor. So, I kind of look at it like that, and therefore there is a huge scope to leverage on these opportunities. But definitely a firm believer, I mean, even on the work life balance, I totally agree with the point of view like what Arun gave. I can visualize myself with that work schedule and the work life balance and the need to, how you drop your kids to school and then your routine starts. But having said that, I think all of us across generations, we all are looking for a work life harmony. And that's true across generations. I mean, I don't think that that applies to one generation and doesn't apply to the other. I think we've reached a stage where all of us want to live a life where there is work life harmony. I wouldn't even say balance. I mean, even if you're trying to balance out things while you're at work, I think that's where the answer is. So yeah, I mean, some views there.
Yes, no, and I absolutely agree. And I'm also always on the fence of calling it work life harmony or integration, where both of them very seamlessly sit well with each other. And you're not at the cusp or crossroad of constantly choosing one over the other. And I think once you have established that state of flow between the different things that you are into, be it your personal life, your work life, that's where things like extended hours and pressure and all of these things kind of tend to dwindle away. And I think Arun, you bring to for a very very relevant point about startups, where some of these hierarchical boundaries have also been overturned. Startups are typically led by very very young professionals who may then go on to hire or bring on board team members who are more tenured. Eventually, for an organization to run, it's not about this generation or the other. And I think that's what we started the conversation with. It's about how can we synchronize and bring it all together so we have an amplified beautiful output at the end of the day. So very very relevant pointers there. Thank you so much. Vani, since we were speaking with you, I'd also like to understand, because you brought to fore that you have been over the years working with different generations by way of the nature of your work, the roles that you've been doing. And we do understand that every generation, in that sense, because of their context, because of their influences, have different innate strengths that they may be able to bring to the table. How do you think, at a systemic level, at an organization level, can then we create opportunities for each generation to be able to shine?
Yeah. So as I said, I think one example I gave already in terms of, how do you create these multi-generational teams when I said that the Gen X brings a different thing to the table versus a baby boomer. I think as far as an organization goes, it's very very simple. I feel we just make it a little complicated because these days all the time we are onto that, how to handle a Gen Z, how to handle a Gen Z. Honestly, I don't think there's anything to handle in there. I think you have to just let people be. So authenticity, one thing I feel I'm a big advocate of. Like we as DNI champions have to create that conducive environment where people can express themselves. There can be meaningful conversations. There are, regular connects where people know what's going on in the organization. So therefore, transparency becomes very very important. Partnering for mutually beneficial projects, I think, is again a very very important point which we often keep forgetting. I mean, it's more about the project end of the day. So it's, the so-called aspiration versus the business goal. So as leaders, all of us have a responsibility that the shared vision of the organization is brought back to focus time and again, and the values and the behaviors are integrated. Now again, going back to my point of, having a norm versus a way of doing things. Now we could have mutual beliefs and values. However, our views about how we want to demonstrate or exhibit a particular value could differ. Even if I look at respect, I mean, all of us want to earn respect, we want to give respect, but maybe the way of a Gen Z could be different from the way of a Gen Y or a millennial. And we need to understand that and kind of, make the most of these small differences. Of course, policies, being inclusive and all that is one part of it, which obviously all of us don't have that much control depending upon what organization we work for, because there's a common thread already in place. But these small things definitely, along with a lot of emphasis, I think, on sensitization on unconscious biases, because that's something which I've seen it's worked throughout my career wherever I've gone in DNI, at least since 2018, since the time I've been wearing this hat. The more leaders and the, in fact, the entire top level, top down approach, so to say, the entire organization has to be sensitized so that, they can do away with those generational stereotypes which become, these roadblocks to they becoming inclusive. And that way they empathize better, they give people the opportunity to shine, and they themselves realize that, okay, picking up the right people for a particular project is only going to get more on the table. So, it's about what moves the needle, and exactly not losing vision of where we want to go. And, not getting overwhelmed, like, oh God, you've got 50% Gen Z on your team. How do you manage? I mean, lately, last 1 month, I don't know how many of these conversations, I've been privy to. Any forum I've gone to, it's like, oh God, how do you manage? I mean, I don't understand what's there to manage.
Yeah,
We just as leaders have to be more cognizant, and for us as DNI people, I think we have to make others more sensitive that, okay,
absolutely.
be flexible to your style of leadership. Maybe
Hmm.
if it's a Gen Z, use a coaching style. Maybe if
Yes,
it's a Gen X, work more around the methods, the structure.
yes.
So it's more about being flexible and being strong advocates as well as leaders. I think there are these couple of things. Yeah, otherwise I can go on and on, but yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think such a fundamental thing for us to really go back to is something that we've all learned, understood in different shapes and forms: situational leadership. There is no one style of leadership. There is no one size fit all approach, especially when it comes to leadership. So even the intergenerational, intersectionality in that sense goes on to just enable us to apply that a little bit more. I, in fact, have a fun thing that I'm going to ask all of you all right after this. But before that, Arun, if I could bring you in to bring to fore your perspective on what, according to you, is the lay of land when it comes to creating these different opportunities for different generations to shine through.
Yeah. So at least Diksha, I can, like I said, I've always been at EY, so I can talk in EY's context. Over the last 20 years roughly, and but for the doggedness and single-minded focus of Gen X, EY India wouldn't have become what it is today, right? So they decided to just build this organization from, and we are all benefiting from it, right? And there is absolute, and they carry that with a lot of pride, and there is absolute respect for Gen X for having built that organization. There is, and that's across generations, and we've seen them do it, and the ones who've come after us get that message from us. So therefore, there is no doubt about what they've done. Traditionally, EY or any other big four was looked at as more like an accounting and tax firm, right? And that's probably still the stereotype. But you would be surprised to know that EY is very, very big on tech consulting, which was not our forte ever. And where did that thought come from? It came from the generations which came with knowledge of things which are happening on the ground today, and therefore Gen X was flexible enough in their mindset to pivot at the right time to understand that some of our traditional businesses may not grow at a certain pace, and therefore it is important for us to pivot towards new service lines. And that is how EY has continued its growth path. And that knowledge has come from us, and maybe more so from Gen Z. That is one. And second is I think EY's whole social media game. This was not so much prevalent when we were starting off, or the ones before us. For us, business came more from networking, like private network, like personal networks, meeting clients. But the power of social media is something that we're learning from the new gen, right? And we have these LinkedIn champions within EY who are all from Gen Z. They teach us how to put out a message, how to be subtle on LinkedIn, Uh, so I think that's what is creating this harmonious organization where we are learning from Gen Z. We are giving respect to the Gen X what they've built, and we believe in their leadership to continue, and we feel that they have to be there for this organization to continue to grow. And people like us, the millennials, kind of play that balancing act, right? Because we've seen what Gen X is built, and we see what the new generation is
Yeah.
getting on the table. So it's like, grandmom, mom, and yourself being in the same house, right? The mother has to play that balancing act. So that's what we do. So I
Yeah.
think and we give a lot of avenues for Gen Z to come up with new ideas. So we have these competitions where they can build new tech which is relevant for our business, and we have competitions across EY, and that goes up. That's judged by maybe the country managing partner, right? And therefore there's a lot of recognition given to people who come up with new ideas, which are adopted, and people are rewarded for it. Yeah, I think that's my bit on how we are at least doing it at EY.
Lovely. And I think a lot of takeaways from that one, Arun. And I think the one thing that I really have enjoyed thus far in the conversation is that we're all aligned in our own subtle way of thinking and approaching this situation, that it's not this generation versus that generation. We're not pegging anyone and slotting anyone and stereotyping anyone and saying it's this versus that. It's all us together working towards building a more harmonious ecosystem, right? Which is a fantastic spin. And I think, Arun, you kind of preempted the fun question that I wanted to ask you. So I'm going to let you think about one more trait. But I think the one thing that was really crossing my mind when all of you all were talking was that what is that one thing that you really admire about a generation other than yours? Arun, I know you spoke a little bit about it, so I want you to think about maybe something else that comes to your mind. But if I could bring you in here, Aditya, followed by Mahima, Bani, what is that one thing that you really admire in a generation other than yours? Something that you think we can learn from them, we're learning from them, that we aspire to be ourselves, that we just see in them and we wish, what if we also could kind of bring that to our life?
So I think great question, Diksha. I think the one generation before us, I think the Gen X, I really respect them. I think Arun had used this word, doggedness, right? I think the in face of adversity, not being able to give up and just focus on the goal and what you want to achieve as an organization, also personally, right? I think that's something I really, really admired of the previous generation. And, I look forward to learning a lot from them as we go forward.
I can talk about an experience that I had, and then we'll talk about that particular trait that I admire about a particular generation. I had a Gen Z team member, um, and I remember getting bowled over by the kind of stunning visual creation he had submitted for his assignment. And what was impressive was not just his craft, but when I asked him a question, how did you end up creating such a beautiful video, high quality design, which I hadn't really seen in my life ever? So, and he was just a 21-year-old 2 years ago. His answer impressed me. He said that, you know what, Mahima, I grew up experimenting a lot with the latest technology, and he self-educated through tutorials on YouTube, and not just him but the whole group of his. So I loved what he brought to the table at 21, and all thanks to his curiosity levels. So one thing that I would love to learn from Gen Z is how curious they are, and that's bringing in a lot of fresh perspective. Thank you.
I absolutely love those two shares. Thank you, Aditya, Mahima. Bani, anything from you on that one?
I think it's an extension of what Mahima just mentioned. And I would say I don't admire, I'm truly envious, Diksha, of Gen Z because they just refuse to take the pressure of doing things in a certain way. So it doesn't have to be status quo. Everything is flexible, fluid. I mean, I'm not saying we are not the ones who are not courageous, but immense courage and immense ability to speak up for things, and to kind of take them in the stride and say, okay, aise nahi aise kar lete. That whole risk taking ability is something I'm in complete awe of. Yeah.
Absolutely agree with you on that one. Arun, anything else that you'd like to bring to fore?
Yeah, I think Disha, going back to I think something that we've already discussed. I think the kind of confidence and flamboyance that Gen Z gets, I wish I had it when I started off. Their ability to ask tough questions in a room full of seniors from across the organization is absolutely amazing. Uh, I mean, they can very easily ask a question about the firm's revenue, profitability, and how that translates into their remuneration, right? They can
Yeah,
go ahead and do it. I
absolutely.
would, I would have never done that. I still can't after becoming a partner. Just it's not wired in me, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely amazing, and also their realization of what makes them tick. So just to give you an example, maybe about a year ago, this teammate of ours said that I want to do a digital detox. He said I'm not sure if you're realizing, but I'm undergoing a digital detox, and it took me a while to even understand what is he trying to say, but when I did realize, I understood that he's so aware of the fact that there is something which is not doing well for him or her, and therefore they want to take a break from it, and the ability and the confidence to say it out loud, saying that, boss, I want to do this, and there is so much respect from my side for him to be able to say that. I mean, that's absolutely something that I never had.
No, absolutely. And I think just taking a cue from what you shared, Arun, I think I remember and I recollect an incident that happened about 2 years back with a very young person in my team. I think one of the youngest ones that I've ever kind of worked with in that sense, a 21, 22-year old. And I was initially really taken aback by the straightforwardness in her communication and approach. And in my head, I'd like to believe I'm a very straightforward person. I like things on the table. But, just the sense of clarity with which she walked into the room, and I won't generalize this, but just this particular person and this particular anecdote. And again, like you said, the confidence with which they own their choices. It's not. I know there's a lot of conversation and noise around entitlement and brashness, etc. But I also feel that there is this underlying confidence with which they approach things, and with which they just own their own decisions and choices, which is something that I wish I really had back in the day. Today, after all of these years of journey, yes, I may still be getting there, but to really start your journey at that point is very, very inspiring. But thank you. I think some brilliant shares there. Vaishnavi, if we could bring you in here, anything that you'd like to share, ask, reflect upon, basis wherever we've gotten so far.
Yeah, I think it's been really, really enriching listening to all of you. One thought I had after listening to the different inputs, I think we brought this up at the beginning when we, played that little game to say what is the one stereotype that each of you have busted, a myth that you've busted in your own personal life. Here, I'd like to bring up this point of intersectionality because we talk about intersectionality when we talk about diversity, right? No two women are the same, for instance. No two persons with disability are the same. Similarly, no two people from the same generation might be the same. While broadly they might have carried similar influences, social, economic, political, macro influences, but each individual is shaped by also which socioeconomic strata they belong to, what kind of family they belong to, which school they went to. So that's a thought that came to my mind, that while we might try to broadly categorize, it becomes harder when we look at these many intersectionalities. So that's one reflection. And in terms of the next question that I had for the panel is, so far we've explored the differences between various generations, both the strengths, the challenges, the causes of friction. Moving forward, I would like to know what are the sources of commonalities? What brings all of us together? And what are the common threads that unite all of us? What are some values that are universal across all generations? And happy to open it up to all panel members. Would love to hear all your views.
If I could just, if the panel would allow me to jump in, right? I think some of the themes that I think span across generations, and just before I talk about that, I'm somebody who believes that a lot of this conversation is reacting to what we see at this point of time in terms of the conversation on different generations, what they bring to the table, so on and so forth, right? It's very important for us to always take a step back and see what could be conditioned biases, what could be stereotypes, and how we could break them. On that note, I would say the three things which stand out across generations, which stay the same across, and this is purely from a HR perspective. Others would have a different perspective. The three R's, as I call them, right? Respect, recognition, and runway, right? Respect, which is a hygiene factor. Respect as an individual, as somebody who comes from a different generation, different identity, or different, social strata. Recognition for what you bring to the table, recognition for the work that you do, and of course reward is part of the recognition in this category. And the third is runway for what I'm able to achieve for myself professionally and also in my career and also for the organization. These three things are common across all generations, and it's very important for organizations to focus on building that up as part of their DNA.
Can I just add one more R to what Aditya mentioned? Just a very short response there. I would say resilience also, because no matter what generation we, you know, environment is constantly changing. As we say, change is the only constant, and I'm sure all of us agree. So the ability to overcome challenges and bounce back and, kind of again go back and fail and still try and succeed again and again, I think that's the fourth R I would take the liberty to try and add, Aditya, there.
It's a great ad, Bani.
Thank you, Bani Aditya. That the 4 hours, I think, a very uh, valuable nugget that we're going to be taking away from this conversation. Arun, Mahima.
So I think Aditya and Bani have called it out beautifully. I would just say that yes, respect, appreciation. I think Aditya said recognition. And for me, I think everybody wants to just contribute in a meaningful way. So even though we associate purpose with Gen Z more, however, I still feel that you look at people from baby boomers generation or from traditionalists generation, some of Gen X as well. While we have a lot of misconceptions around those generations, we still feel that everybody wants to bring out their best for the society, for the workplace they are in. Yeah, like someone also said on the panel, I think definitions and ideas of how these traits look like, they may change, but at the end of the day, all generations want that, desire that, the same thing.
I think very similar to what Mahima said in the context of like a professional services firm like ours. I think the willingness or the want to add value is common across all generations, right? Irrespective of whether there's an analyst in the room, nobody wants to be there just for being there. They want to bring out their perspective and be valuable to the team. I think that's something that is common across all generations, at least in the context of a professional services firm.
Thank you. I agree. Ultimately, we are all working towards achieving those organizational outcomes, whether it's growth, profitability, or adding value to our end customers. And that brings me to, very related question, which is what are some strategies that you've seen being adopted successfully within organizations that you've been part of to foster harmonious multi-generational workforce? It could be from a policy lens or something which was a leadership intervention, um, you know, or any culture related work. What worked? We could also discuss things that possibly didn't work and what we learned from some of those strategies as well.
Okay, so while we've spoken about a lot of aspects, so I'll just try to speak about two things which come to my mind right now. One, I think, is initiatives around reverse mentoring. At least for me, with I've done this with two organizations, and while we've been very, very skeptical as we were trying to kind of introduce, especially I'm talking about like 2 3 years back, where we've had instances like people making comments on how they were blocked against this whole process, the reverse mentoring versus the traditional mentoring. But eventually, when we winded up with the projects, traditional we all are used to, but reverse mentoring, I think it's a two-way street. While we thought, the Gen Zs usually are the one who would land up teaching digitization or social media. These are the common topics which come to our mind. We eventually realized that both land up learning, because the what the Gen Z gets eventually is how to navigate more effectively within the ecosystem, how to get the right guidance, how to culturally adapt. And what beautifully works for the senior leaders, so to say, even besides the knowledge, is a whole lot of humility and adaptation, which is something which I've kind of learned as an additional takeaway as an additional takeaway here, because a lot of leaders have come up to me and said that we felt we've become more humble in the process, and we felt we are more kind of adaptable and flexible now. And can we have these meetings outside office, because usually the Gen Z people don't feel comfortable in cabins, so that's, I think, one initiative which we can strongly advocate. The other is, I think, technology plays a very, very important role here, because the minute you give customized learning platforms for whatever initiative you're introducing, and you give a blend of both online and offline, that's where they can strike a common chord and then get the takeaways in their own language. So these are the two things which come to my mind, because the others more or less we've spoken about. Yeah.
Yeah, some great takeaways on that one, Bani. Anyone else who'd like to maybe chime in here and talk about this at a systemic organizational level? And I think another nuance or color that I may request you to think about when you're talking about this. A lot of times there are policies, there are programs, there are interventions. But how many of these are really put to use? For example, the other day I was having a conversation with someone and we were talking about the paternity policy. So the paternity leave exists, but what is the uptake on that paternity leave in the organizations? So processes, interventions, engagements may exist, but what is the uptake, or what is the downside on adoption that you see when engagements like these were brought to fore? Over to you, Aditya. I know you were trying to come in here. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Diksha. I think it's a very pertinent point that you bring up, right? I think it's sometimes it's not about what is there in the policy or the intervention, but how is it actually implemented, and that makes all the difference. So I'll talk about a very simple example, right? Just a couple of months ago, when I was with my previous organization, we had instituted a platform called Meet the People Session, right? And it's a very simple one. It's just about the CEO kind of meeting up with different, members of the organization. So we divide that into different as per the demographics. So we had interns kind of, earmarked for a separate demographic, right? So that you get a different perspective. The conversation from there was very rich, and a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions, a lot of challenges, and I think that really kind of made a lot of difference in terms of thinking. But now, two things I'd like to call out. One is, these sessions are easy to kind of think about and put together. But end of the day, one is in terms of consistency, second is rigor, and the third is what do you do in terms of the follow up or the feedback that comes through. That's very important because people are constantly assessing whether you're working on the feedback they give you, right? If you're working on the feedback as an organization and they see that their suggestions are being taken up, then the confidence and the trust in the organization increases. And that, I think, is a very important differentiator in terms of what helps interventions like these succeed.
So obviously, there's a lot of research also, in fact, that goes on to show that leaders are getting younger. There's some research that goes on to show that is 45 the new retirement age. I mean, obviously armed with this latest technology, global education, exposure, information, a mindset which enables risk-taking, entrepreneurship, etc. Are organizations today valuing skills more than experience? And is that a pivotal shift that we see? Is there a trend that we're observing around us? If yes, then what really could be the possible consequences that this could have on how the workforce is possibly going to pan out over the next few years?
I love this African proverb, which is the youth can walk faster. However, the elder knows the road. So I firmly believe in that fact. And see, we need to actually balance out the age, experience, and a plethora of, knowledge of the industry and the organizations that the older generations carry. And also the fresh perspectives, the youthful energy, exuberance, technical mindset, entrepreneurial spirit that the younger generations carry. So there needs to be a balance there in order to have a successful organization. But I also feel that, yes, you're right. The trend of leaders getting younger is on the rise. I am up for it because I see that a lot of companies are making the most of it through digitally transforming their businesses. Thanks to the younger generations for bringing that energy and that know how, tech know how. The second bit is about the fact that now there has been open access to global education and information. So, hence, that worldview outlook also helps there. Entrepreneurial mindset that you talked about. So, through those innovative business models that they've been exposed to, through the startup culture that they have been exposed to, the hustler mindset, I think that gives them an advantage. And all of us know about the tech adoption stuff that they bring on, so which is also great. Purpose-led leadership, sustainable leadership, servant leadership. I think there are very, very beautiful nuances to this kind of a leadership as well. But at the end of the day, I don't know whether you heard it last time or not. There was this technical error, but there is this silver tsunami, and due to which many baby boomers are on the verge of retiring now. So it's very important for those historians of the organizations and the industry to pass on their knowledge to the younger leaders so that uh, you know the, the success of the industries and the organizations can still get carried forward. That's what I would just say.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that, Mahima. Pani, Aditya, Arun, anyone who'd like to come in here with their views?
Okay, I'll go first. I think a business like ours is built over decades and based on a lot of trust that we are able to develop with clients, right? And that how we deliver those services comes a lot, and how we improve that comes a lot from tech. So therefore, I think a blend of Gen X, Gen Z, and us, I mean, has to be there for the business to move forward. You can't replace trust with tech and say here it is, we'll do it efficiently. But so for us, I think and that is what we strive to do, and that is why we have and we try to build that harmony across generations. And I think at EY, what we are doing, and we would want to do more of it, is I think we believe that sports is a great leveler, right? So we do so much of it that people across generations come together and play, and that just creates an informal environment where people are able to express and people get to know each other. I think that is something that we are doing pretty well.
Thank you. That's a very, very, I think, easy to implement nugget there. Something that I'd want for all of us to take back with us. Sports being used and leveraged as a leveler across generations. Aditya, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, Disha, I think I'm just going to talk about my experience of having worked as a startup and having seen a CEO who is probably 29 at that point of time. This is about 10 years ago. Um, is a superstar in the ecosystem. So I don't think there are any guesses. If you take a look at my LinkedIn profile, I don't think it's a mystery. But I do want to call out that there are individuals who obviously are extremely competent and go into some of these positions, right? And it's a trend that even if you are not open to, it's going to happen, right? There's no denying that. But it's important for organizations, HR leaders, and for the CEOs themselves to be aware of what could be possible pitfalls and where do they kind of have those limitations and challenges, right? One good way of doing that is to have a personal board of advisors, right? And you can constitute the personal board of advisors with people you work with on a daily basis. You must have people you work with on a daily basis, but you also have people you trust and you're mentored by. It could be from external bodies, right? But they need to see you at work a little bit. So when those individuals are able to give you constant feedback and to let you know that here is where you're probably failing, or here's where I see a limitation, and you're opening to listen to that, I think that's where that leader is able to kind of bridge the gap between age, experience, maturity, and gravitas. And that applies to everybody, irrespective of which position that you are in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Aditya. The one point that I definitely take back from this entire conversation is that thankfully we're at a point in how the workforce is shaping up where it is definitely skills and knowledge over just experience and tenure, which I think is a very positive shift, thanks to technology, Gen Z, whatever we want to attribute this to. But that is really moving things in a more progressive, growth oriented direction. And like we say, it is about balancing all ends of the spectrum, and it is about working together and not one over the other. On that note, we're in the world of technology, we're in the world of social media. So I'm going to request you all to think about your quick 30 to 60-second takeaway. We all see Instagram reels. Your one nugget for the audience who's going to tune into this conversation on what is that one thing about intergenerational workforce that you want to leave them with in a quick 30, 60-second roundup. Don't worry, we'll not hold you to the time to the T, but just as brief and as real friendly you could make it.
Maybe I can just go first because of the paucity of time that I have. I haven't thought through, but let me just see what I can come up with. I feel this is the most interesting time when we have about 5 generations working together in the workforce: traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Zs. And even though out of this conversation, what I derive is that even though we have in a way boxed up people into those generations, I think it's a generational myopia that we have created, by saying that this generation belongs to this particular birth year and hence they are like that. So I think we need to move away from those misconceptions, and get to a level playing field where everybody is viewed through their lived experiences, their unique talents, and the expertise that they bring onto the table, where they do not have to hide their true identity, and they can feel uh, safer bringing their whole selves to work and in the society as well. That's what I would say.
Thank you for that roundup, Mahima. Whoever is ready to go next.
Yeah, I think Iksha, my summary is that harmony across generations and respect for each other's strengths and an understanding of one's weaknesses is the only way forward. You can't have a situation where one is fighting for the other's space. I don't think that will work. You have to figure out a way to create harmony across generations. That's the only way forward.
Thank you for that, Arun. Thank you.
I can go next,
Yes,
Diksha.
Aditya.
I think change is inevitable. Change is happening, and change is happening at a pace that is just frightening at this point of time, right? So we have to be ready for that. The one thing I do want to leave the audience is learn a way to identify what could be potential biases, right? What could be conditioned biases, and have a roadmap or have a framework in place in terms of how you could actually overcome that at work, both for yourself, your teams, as well as the leadership teams that you work with.
Sure. Thank you so much. Bani.
So I think the one who goes last, most of the points are covered. But I would say 3 C's here. I would say change together. So embrace change together, continuously learn together, and constantly innovate together. I mean, that's what
I love that,
I
Bani.
summarized right now.
Fantastic. I think that's
So,
such a good mechanism and takeaway
yeah.
for everyone. And
Yeah.
I love things. I think that's the consulting mindset when they're just structured in these 3 or 4 bullet points, and when boom, it's simple to take back.
So I've
But
never worked for a consulting firm, so I wouldn't give that credit to them. But yeah, we deal with them enough, so yeah.
yes, yes, absolutely.
So,
No,
right.
but thank you so much, everyone. And we don't want you to go away still. I know, Mahima, you have a little bit of a hard stop, so we'll possibly have to let you go whenever it is the time for you to. But I'd invite Vaishnavi to come in here for a little fun segment, which is where she's going to put you all on the hot seat for a rapid fire round. Over to Vaishnavi because she does it the best. So, Vaishnavi, if you could come in here and run this for us, please.
If you had to switch to another generation for a day, which would it be and why? Mahima, you'd like to go first?
Sure, I would love to switch to the silent generation where phones were a choice and never around your neck or in your hand always.
Thank you. Aditya, would you like to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to give you a contrarian answer. I would not like to switch to any generation. I'm happy being a millennial, happy getting all the challenges and the opportunities that millennials have had. So I'm going to stick to my generation.
Lovely. Arun?
I think I'll stick to my generation too, Vaishnavi. I love playing the balancing act. I can switch and be comfortable with either of them depending on how I'm feeling on a certain day. So yeah, I'll stick to my generation too. Yeah.
Awesome. Bani?
Happy in my space, but I think I made it very clear earlier Gen Z, unapologetically themselves. That's why.
Amazing. So, a counter question to that, what's one stereotype about your generation you wish to dispel? Mahima, you'd like to start that one?
I said it earlier. Millennial. I'm a millennial, and we are not lazy.
Okay. Bani?
I think the tendency to generalize that the generation is not open to new ideas, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think the stereotype that we don't care enough about interests outside of work because we've been schooled in a certain way is not true.
I think that I mentioned the stereotype of being entitled and commitment phobic, which is attributed to millennials. I think that's absolutely not true. It's just that the way things are being looked at in terms of loyalty towards an organization is changing. So I think we just have to be very clear.
Perfect. What's the best piece of advice you've received from someone in a different generation?
Um, my mentor, Mr. Munish Sood from Impact, he told me once that we should be striving for maximizing our potential and becoming the best version of ourselves. He's a Gen X, I believe. So I loved that piece of advice. I would stick to it.
I think
Aditya?
the one that I got was, oh sorry, I'll tell you go first.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Go
The
ahead.
one,
That's
the one which I got, I don't know, okay, go forward. The one that I got was don't lose sight of the forest for the trees.
a good one.
One that I got, and I've heard that quite often, is hard work is more important than ability. So that's something that I've heard of so many times, and I absolutely love that fact. I love that phrase. I think it's Bunny.
Bani?
Yeah. No, I thought she'll say Bani. That's why I was
Ah.
waiting. Okay, so it's not more about advice. It's something I've always followed as well, and of course it's got reinforced through many mentors at different stages in life. So it's about keep focusing on work. There's no substitute for hard work, and of course a mantra which I always follow, and it's there if you'd ever visit my cabin as well, any organization I work for. It says work hard in silence, let success make the noise. So that's something I always follow as well. Yeah.
Lovely. Next question. Describe your generation in one word. Mahima, you'd like to start?
Now, I don't believe in saying this, but I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm going to pass that. I can't describe my generation and label it in just one word. Apologies, but I think we are moving away from generalizations, so I can't say anything. Speechless.
more than generalization. So it's not really so much the sentiment behind this question is not about labeling. The sentiment about this question is that one innate thing about our generation that really sticks out for you, that really resonates the most with you, that deeply is amplified in who you are.
It
So
could
with
even be a trend. It could even be a trend that shaped the generation.
a
That's also
lingo, a trend, or something that is really just stuck. Oh, this, like I don't know about you all, but for some of us, Beatles music, for someone something else, whatever that little thing is about your generation that's really stuck out for you.
Maybe I'll
That
come back
really,
to it later. Let me hear others' responses.
sure,
I still
sure,
can't think of one word.
absolutely. We'll make it two, but the sentiment is very, very crisp. Moment it becomes a sentence, it
I,
loses the essence.
I can think of one now. I can think of one now.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
it's a sandwich generation.
Sandwich generation.
trend.
All right, fantastic. I think
But
Arun would have also wanted to allude to something like that. This is what I've heard
Yeah.
from him so far.
I
But
I probably I'd probably say pendulum, so we can swing depending on which
pendulum,
way
I
we
love
want to
that.
go.
Okay, okay.
I think I would say we are one generation who takes notes and doesn't rely that much on memory. So yeah, being very methodical, structured,
Yeah,
and I hardly see people taking notes. At least pen and paper, they don't. Like even now when I'm liking the points, I'm writing them
yeah,
down on a side. So yeah, I
yeah.
mean, while I'll not try to bucketize, but yeah,
Yes, no, absolutely.
yeah,
It's like we said, it's all in fun. It's all in
yeah,
yeah.
good
yeah,
spirit. Aditya,
I think we're setting the trend for unconventional career choices. So that's the trend
I
that I'm
love
looking
that.
forward to the most.
yeah. Like
I
that.
love that. Absolutely.
Okay, so our last concluding question. It's just a fun thing. What's your go-to emoji?
For me, it's an upside down emoji because that clearly explains the chaos and the joy that life brings to me.
For me, it's a handshake on partnership and collaboration, bridging all the generational gaps. Yeah.
Arun?
I'm really bad with emojis, so I just send a thumbs up every time someone asks me something.
Are you sure you're not a millennial, Arun? You're a Gen X. Because
I
by the thumbs
probably
up.
am. I don't know.
Yeah, for me, it's the crying out loud emoji, which is basically when you laugh a lot, then you start crying. That's what I use the most because you've got to have a sense of humor to navigate this world.
Yeah.
Lovely.
No one asked me, but I'm going to chime in here. For me, it's that dancing woman emoji. Because all the time that I have something fun to do, something exciting to do, that's my go-to emoji for all things fun. But
I think I have a second one, Diksha, after listening to that the one which says can't see. That's
yeah,
when
I
people
know,
don't
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
understand
See
in
no
one go.
evil, the monkey. Yeah.
And you have to tell them again and again. I think there are two, three of those. One is the
Yes,
girl and one is the monkey.
yes,
Oh, that's as well.
On a
absolutely.
different note, I think one of the most significant achievements was when I taught my mom how to use emojis. And,
Oh, lovely.
she started using it on WhatsApp quite a bit. So I felt really proud of that.
Fantastic. So do you now have an overdose of emojis on your phone?
I certainly do.
Yeah,
I
okay.
do. I have 100 more stickers from Gen Z which I use.
Fantastic. Fantastic. On that note, I know we're at the top of the hour and I know some of you have extended, but thank you so very much. Just so heartening to see all of us coming in together, talking about themes that truly matter to us. I think a lot for us to go back and reflect upon. What a fun conversation. Thank you so much for making time.